G'day guys, E53 here, and I'm putting together this video at the moment 1 day away from the start of practice, the first practice session for 2019, the opening salvo of hostilities of this season. And I wanted to run through the top 5 things that I'm going to be looking at in the early part of this season at the very least. The 5 things that I think are going to make for the story and the narrative of this season, aside of course from the championship battle. But before I start, a little bit of sad news coming out of the Formula One world this morning, and that is the sudden passing of Charlie Whiting, the race director, long-time race director in Formula One. He's been fulfilling that role for many, many years. He started in Formula One way back with Brabham and Hesketh in the 70s. He's certainly been around the sport a long, long time, was massively respected, and was over here in Melbourne getting ready to perform his usual role of race director, and unfortunately died in his hotel. So very sad news, and I think that it's going to be a big challenge for the FIA to be able to run things without him. He was, as race director, he's the single most important person at the race venue on any given weekend, and I'm sure they've got a deputy, but administratively and everything else, it's going to be really difficult for those guys who obviously used to work with him and everything to cover somebody that important. And aside from that particular point, there's obviously the personal side of it for all his friends and family as well. So certainly very sad, and condolences to everybody who's involved in that situation. Moving on now, I suppose after that bit of a somber start. Going to be looking at, as I mentioned, the top 5 things that I'm going to be looking at for the start of this season. And the first one, of course, number 5, we're going to count down 5 to 1. So number 5, Kimi Räikkönen in the Alfa Romeo. I keep wanting to call that team Sauber. Of course, it's not Sauber anymore. It's Alfa Romeo. And it's been a long, long time since they've had a driver of Kimi's stature in that team. I think the last time that you could say that they had somebody similar was maybe when Robert Kubica was there, but of course they were BMW Sauber in those days. And to have a top-line driver, albeit one who's probably definitely closer to the end of his career than he is to the beginning, it's going to be very interesting to see if he can drag that car up the field. It wasn't a bad car last year by any stretch, and with their closer relationship with Ferrari being a fully Alfa Romeo branded team this season, it's going to be very interesting to see if Kimi can work a couple of pieces of magic throughout the season in that car. Maybe even bring it home on the podium. Be very, very interesting to see indeed. So number 4 is Williams. Williams as a team, and also, side note to that, Robert Kubica. Obviously, one of the biggest stories of the off-season was the fact that Robert Kubica had finally managed to secure a race seat, and this is the first time he's had an opportunity to do something like that since his rally accident all those years ago, where he nearly lost his right arm, and he's had multiple surgeries since then. He was very, very badly injured indeed. Came back to race driving, found that he could drive everything bar a single-seater just because of the way that his arm had to move, and just as the way he's recovered and the way he's developed and so on, he's actually been able to sort of make that work now. So he's able to drive a single-seater race car like a Formula One car. And with his experience, although the sport is very, very different now to the sport which he last competed in, I think it's going to be something that everyone's watching, and everyone's going to have their fingers crossed that Williams can recover from their slow start to the season and their messy start to the season. That I think it's been well covered elsewhere, that the issues that they've been having behind the scenes. But if they can get their act together and perform somewhat of a miracle, to be perfectly honest, wouldn't it be great to be able to see Robert put in some storming drives and get some great results there? So certainly one to watch in Melbourne, given the high attrition rate that we often see. And if you're not going to say anything else to the Williams, it looks as though it has been reliable in testing. So let's hope they get to the finish and can score some points. So number 3, Daniel Ricciardo, the hometown hero, Daniel Ricciardo, doing his first race for Renault in Melbourne, having left Red Bull. Obviously, there's a whole lot of different reasons. Some say he was running from a fight with Max. Christian Horner certainly said that. Daniel was saying, no, it was just time for a change. I didn't feel as though I was going to have, if you read between the lines, he's sort of saying that he didn't feel as though he was going to have the support there that Max was getting necessarily. So he's decided to jump ship. He's going to be very much number 1 in the Renault team, I think. at least early on, unless Nico Hulkenberg starts to outperform him. I don't think too many people think it's going to happen, despite the fact that Nico Hulkenberg is undoubtedly very talented. I think most people believe that Ricciardo will actually beat him. And if he's able to really gel with that team in the early days and snatch some good results, I think Alan Jones earlier on this week was saying he wouldn't be surprised to see Ricciardo stand on the podium at some stage this season, and if they get their act together, it'd be great to see Hulkenberg also break that podium drought as well. He's certainly a driver that deserves better results than he's had so far, but to see those two up there on the podium would be absolutely fantastic. Renault seem very optimistic, but they're kind of one of the midfield teams that always sort of acts optimistic during testing. So we'll see once qualifying and the race happens over this weekend. We'll know a little bit more about where they're sat exactly right. And speaking of Ricciardo's old team, Red Bull, number 2 is Honda. So Honda, having moved from just supplying, well, of course they came back in with McLaren and that all was horrible. They've moved on to Toro Rosso, where they seem to have been able to at least stabilise a little bit. And now, of course, they're moving on to Red Bull. And despite the fact that Red Bull are out there in public saying, oh, we love Honda. Honda's been fantastic to work with. Oh, they're all just so completely in love with Honda. There's also been some rumours flying around the place that the Honda is struggling a little bit with engine vibrations and things like that. And they didn't complete an awful lot of laps in testing either, although a lot of that was down to the fact that Gasly was off the road more often than he was on. But there's quite a few doubts remaining over that package, and it's going to be a big point of focus over the course of the season, exactly what they're able to accomplish together. I think everybody is in agreement that Honda will get it right one day. Whether this is the season in which they get it right, only time will tell. But if they don't, I can't imagine it being a great deal of time before Christian Horner starts giving them the Renault treatment. Which brings us on to number 1, which is Charles Leclerc at Ferrari. And this is a bit of a feel-good story, just basically because the seat that Leclerc currently occupies, everybody was of the opinion that that was going to be Jules Bianchi's seat before he sadly passed away. So Charles Leclerc as well, being Jules Bianchi's godson. Charles said going into this season that I'm out there trying to do what I can for Jules. I want to get the results that he should have had. And when he gets his first win, and I really do believe that he's going to win a race this season, there's unlikely to be a dry eye in the house, certainly not at Ferrari. And if he were to do that somewhere really significant, like for example Monaco, where Jules put on probably his greatest ever drive, or Japan where he was sadly killed, it's going to be even more emotional if that's the case, and it's going to be very exciting to see this guy. I think the big question that a lot of people are asking is, can he beat Vettel? Vettel's been a bit shaky the last couple of seasons, so if he comes in, he's able to beat Vettel straight away, or can just build up to it over the course of the season. He could have quite a fight there as well. And it's also interesting because Ferrari has broken with their usual method of always hiring experienced drivers with championships, drivers with big names. They've taken a punt on a younger driver, albeit a Ferrari Academy driver, and it's going to be a real change of pace for them as well. So can't wait to see how that plays out. Anyway, if there's anything else that you guys are going to be keeping an eye on this season, please comment down below. Let us know what it is. And apart from that, we will sit back, we'll enjoy the race over this weekend, and may even come back and dissect it afterwards. Until then, see you next time. E53, goodbye.